What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Primetime Sports Podcast, hosted by Joey Malari. So today's episode, going to give a recap of some of the Week 2 college football games from last weekend and also talk about Week 1 of the NFL. Just going to give a quick recap on a couple games, give my thoughts on some of the teams I like, and then in the NFL, just talk about some headlines from Week 1. So start out with college football, Week 2, San Jose State at Texas. Texas got the win in that game 38-7. Arch Manning was shaky in this one early on, but he found his footing and finished well with 5 total touchdowns and 295 passing yards. He did get picked on a throw to the end zone early on, sometime in the first half, right before halftime. But after that, he played pretty well. I think there was just too much pressure placed on him before he ever took a snap, as a starting quarterback this year. There were expectations to be a Heisman winner and be the number 1 overall pick. And it's just really heavy expectations to live up to. It's not always easy to do that. We'll see how he plays for the rest of the season. He did get comfortable in the second half against San Jose State, but he didn't look great in his first game, to start the season against Ohio State. And then obviously last week was shaky in the first half. So there's some things he has to work on. He hasn't lived up to those number 1 overall pick expectations yet, but as I already mentioned, that's pretty difficult to live up to, especially before you even start this season as a quarterback. As for San Jose State, they were more in this game than the score shows. I know it says 38-7, but it wasn't really that much of a blowout for a lot of it. It was 28-7 at half. I think even that score was a little bit misleading. You had San Jose State miss 2 field goals in the first half, along with 3 fumbles and an interception. They had a lot of points they left on the board in this game. Walker Eggett, the quarterback, had some mistakes in this one as well, but at the same time had some precise passes in some difficult windows. San Jose State can be frustrating to watch because a lot of the time you'll see them, make mistakes that they shouldn't be making, like, missing field goals or, fumbles where, they shouldn't be extending the ball, trying to get a first down, and then somebody comes out and hits it out and it's a fumble. They can be frustrating to watch. I think it was a lot closer of a game than it appeared with the score. San Jose State has some good players, some fun players to watch. I'm a fan of this program. I was a fan of them the last couple of years for Nick Nash, and now I'm just a fan of the program in general, even with Nash being gone. They have a gem in running back Floyd Chalk IV, underrated running back in college football, doesn't get talked about enough. Kyrie Scholes, a wide receiver, played great in this game against Texas, 8 catches for 73 yards. And then Danny Scudero, who's been great to begin the year as a wide receiver, has 16 catches for 255 yards and a touchdown in 2 games so far on the year. He has been great as a wide receiver 1 without Nick Nash. Moving on to the Baylor at SMU game. This game was a thriller, a really fun one to watch. SMU took a 38-24 lead with 8:38 to go. This game ended up being an awesome one at the end. Baylor scored 2 touchdowns in the last 8.5 minutes. SMU had a chance to kick a game-winning field goal from 57 yards out, but they missed as regulation ended. So then in double overtime, Baylor ended up winning the game on a game-winning field goal after SMU missed yet another field goal. There were 45 total points between the fourth quarter, the first overtime, and the second overtime in this game. 1,059 total yards of offense between the two teams, 93 total points. Baylor's quarterback, Sawyer Robertson, was absolutely awesome in this game. He's been balling this season, 7 total touchdowns on the year to no picks. Honestly, I didn't really know much about him, but after seeing him play versus SMU, I was very impressed. A ton of poise in the pocket, a strong arm, good vision. He's very underrated. Honestly, doesn't get talked about enough. He is the 5th player in the last 30 years to have 850 total passing yards with 5 total touchdowns. So 850 or more passing yards, 5 or more total passing touchdowns, and 0 interceptions through the first 2 games of the season. I have not followed college football as much over the last few years since I've been really busy working, at BC, so it's been difficult to watch as many games as I've liked to. But I think Robertson, from what I've seen, is the best quarterback in the country this season. He's really underrated, has a strong arm, has a good vision. I see NFL talent and I watch him play. In his last 3 games of college football, dating back to last season, he has 9 touchdown passes to just 1 interception, and that was versus LSU in 2024, Auburn in 2025, and SMU in 2025. And in each of those 3 games against Power 4 schools, he's thrown for more than 400 passing yards in each of those. So he has been absolutely balling out dating back to last season. And like I said, is one of the most underrated quarterbacks in college football. Bowling Green at Cincinnati. That was a tough one. I do like Bowling Green. I've talked about them on the podcast before. Cincinnati took care of business in this one, winning that game 34-20. Tough one for Bowling Green, but they showed some heart in this one. They outscored Cincinnati 17-13 in the second half. They did win the turnover battle in this game, 1-0. And they did win the time of possession, 37 minutes to 23 minutes for Cincinnati. The Falcons have the right head coach in Eddie George. I just listened to his first podcast earlier this week, and his podcast, which is called Heisman to Headset. I recommend that podcast. Really fun to listen to. Gives a ton of insight on what it's like coaching college football. Gives some insight into his decision to take the job at Bowling Green. Really cool podcast, very engaging, and definitely I think this is the right hire. I think he's going to definitely help Bowling Green rise up in the MAC. Next up, another MAC school, UMass. They hosted Bryant last weekend and somehow lost that game 27-26. Bryant outscored UMass 17-6 in the second half, including kicking their game-winning field goal, a 25-yard field goal at the end of the fourth quarter. Is this the lowest of lows for UMass, you might ask? It's a very fair question. They just lost to an FCS school that went 2-10 last season. They also paid Bryant $325,000 to take this game and play them in Amherst. Bryant somehow won this game. UMass found a way to lose in the second half. And this is Bryant's first win ever over an FBS opponent. UMass also did lose to an FCS school in 2021. They lost to URI. So this isn't their first time losing to an FCS school over the last few years. UMass did decide to cut down on their funding for other sports, including men's basketball and women's basketball, to make this jump possible to the FBS from the FCS level. And obviously this has been a very difficult stretch for them. Since joining the FBS in 2012, UMass has never won more than 4 games in a single football season. They're 8-58 since the 2019 season overall. They're 26-124, so that's 26 wins, 124 losses since joining the FBS in 2012. And since 2009, they are 42-142 overall as a team. So this program has really struggled. This is their first year back in the MAC. They became a full-time member this past year. They signed a deal because I think UMass wanted to get some stability and have a conference to call home, and maybe a way to maybe spark some progress for the football program, knowing that they would have, conference games every year that would already be booked for them, so they wouldn't be an independent anymore and have to find their own games. But that really hasn't been the case so far. It really has been easier for them, and progress hasn't really been sparked so far in the first 2 games of the season. UMass now travels to Iowa and Missouri, so this won't get any easier for them. I would imagine at some point in the future, this program is going to go from being in the FBS back down to the FCS, where they had some success in the past. They won a Division I 2A championship back in 1998. We'll see what the future holds. I root for this program to do well because you want the local programs to have success and be able to show that they can hold their own against, some of the powerhouses in the South and in the West. But like I noted, it's been really tough for UMass in the FBS so far. Now moving on to some fantastic plays from the weekend. I tried to watch as many games as I could last Saturday. I had some time during the day, so I tried to catch as many games as possible. There was an unreal one-handed catch from CMU wide receiver Tyson Davis. Went up and somehow made a catch across his body. Was an awesome one-handed catch. Then San Jose State wide receiver Leland Smith almost made the catch of the year. It ended up being incomplete, but he went up and made a great catch on an underthrown ball, snagging it and making the play around a defensive back and pinning it to the defensive back's helmet. Unfortunately, they said he didn't complete the process of the catch before going out of bounds, since he couldn't get his second hand on the ball before falling out of bounds. And technically, the ball being against the defensive player's helmet wasn't counting as possession, so they unfortunately didn't let him count it as a catch, but that would have been the catch of the year. It was an underthrown ball, and he made a great play on it. And then UConn wide receiver Skylar Bell made a fantastic grab on 4th and 10 with 30 seconds left in regulation against Syracuse to give UConn the chance to set up a game-tying field goal to send the game to overtime. Bell was double covered and the ball was over his head, but he went up and snagged it with one hand and corralled it across his body off of a deflection, bringing it in, and then, as I said, setting up the game-tying field goal. UConn ended up losing that game in overtime to Syracuse, but that was a fun one to watch. Another overtime thriller in that game. I was talking a lot during that day to a friend of mine, Dante, who is a big college football expert, knows college football better than anybody I know. It would be a great addition to the podcast as a guest one day. I was talking with him last Saturday, and we both pointed out that the Saturdays that you don't expect there to be that many great games because it's not as, heavy of a slate of top 25 programs or rivalries, those are sometimes the weeks that are the most enjoyable to watch because they're not as hyped up. And I know I've fallen off of college football a little bit over the last year. I haven't really been able to watch it as much. But last weekend got me back into it. I'm excited to see what the rest of the season holds. I had some time, as I said, last weekend with BC being away. So I was able to watch a lot of games last weekend. It definitely was enjoyable. College football is a thrilling sport, and it's always nice to know there's some game on at some point on Saturday, whether it's Saturday early afternoon or Saturday night. There's always games going on in college football. So now moving on to some of the headlines from week 1 of the NFL season. It's a new season, but it's the same old New York Giants so far through one game. Washington won that game in a season opener against the New York Giants 21-6. The Giants have scored only 12 points in the last 3 season openers combined, and they've been outscored 89-12 in those 3 in a row. So 3 season openers in a row, they've gone outscored 89-12 overall. They're the first team since the 2006 to 2008 Oakland Raiders to lose by 15 points or more in 3 straight season openers. So that's obviously a class you don't want to be in. It's showing that the Giants are never starting seasons competitively and are always finding themselves down heavily in these openers. The issues still remain from the past few years. A horrible offensive line, poor tackling on defense, issues against the run. They allowed 220 rushing yards in this game. The offensive line allowed 8 quarterback hits, and Russell Wilson was pressured on 22 of his 45 dropbacks, which was 49% of his total dropbacks he was pressured on. Under pressure, Wilson was 5 of 16 for 51 yards. James Hudson, who replaced Andrew Thomas at left tackle with Thomas being out, allowed 6 pressures in this game. He really struggled, but the offensive line overall did not do well in this game. It seems like everybody had some issues at some point. The Giants definitely need Andrew Thomas healthy, but history has shown that you really can't rely on him to stay healthy, unfortunately. He's just been battling injuries a lot over the last couple seasons. With that being said, when he is healthy and when he is on the field, he's the Giants' best player overall. Hopefully he's back in the Giants lineup soon, since they really do need him, considering they already are 0-1 and the schedule doesn't get any easier to begin the season. Russell Wilson wasn't great in this one either, and I'm not completely blaming him. I know a lot of people making reports saying he was horrible in this game, which, trust me, he didn't play well, but the offensive line was definitely an issue, and Russ didn't play great at the same time. But I don't know if that necessarily means if you put Jackson Dodd in, everything goes away and all the problems are resolved. Wilson isn't the player he once was in Seattle, where he could use his athleticism and mobility to escape a sack. He can't do that anymore as much as he could in the past. He walked right into pressure a few times in that game. I would not say it's all his fault. As I said, he did struggle. He didn't look great in this game, didn't look good at all. He was 17 of 37 passing, 168 passing yards. Was good on the ground, though, 8 carries for 44 yards. He connected with Malik Nabers just on 5 of his 12 targets for 71 yards. You need to get Nabers the ball more. And Nabers was visibly frustrated on the sidelines during this game, even arguing with Bryant. And like I've mentioned before on the podcast, I felt like Nabers is going to get very upset and frustrated if things go south quick. And I said this probably a couple years ago on the podcast, and I know I said it sometime last season as well, that I feel like Nabers at some point is going to get traded, because I think he's going to get really upset with the Giants losing games. It's going to be visibly frustrated, and I think the Giants are just going to say, you know what, we'll trade him before we sign him to a new contract. And that's not obviously what I want to happen. I think Nabers is one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. I think he's a top 3 talent at the position, but I do think he's going to get frustrated even more if the Giants continue to lose games. And at some point, if the Giants feel like they're not going to pay him, they may decide to trade him, which would obviously be unfortunate, but we've seen it happen a lot in sports. Look at the Dallas Cowboys trading Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers since they didn't want to pay him as much as he wanted. Look at the Boston Red Sox trading Mookie Betts since they didn't want to pay him what he wanted. They traded him to the Los Angeles Dodgers. You see it all the time. Superstars and stars get traded if the team that has them doesn't want to pay them the money that they're demanding. So we'll see what happens, but I do see Malik Nabers continue to get frustrated if this season continues to go awry. So a big question remains, when will Jackson Dart play? Joe Schoen and Bryant right now are playing for their jobs as we speak. I expect Dot to play at some point in the next 4 to 6 weeks. I think they're just going to try to mix up this offense and see if Dot can give them a different sort of juice and maybe kickstart this offense in a way that Russell Wilson isn't able to at this point in his career. I think Jackson Dart is the better quarterback than Russell Wilson at this point. I just worry about throwing him into the game when this offensive line is this poor, and especially early on in the season without Andrew Thomas. I think you probably wait for Andrew Thomas to get back before Jackson Dart plays. I think the same issues remain every single year for this team. The offensive line has been an issue now for the last decade. And the offense obviously hasn't been scoring points either, as a result of that. The defense is still missing tackles. The defensive line had some good pressure in this game. Brian Burns showed up. He had a couple sacks. And then Abdul Carter and Kayvon Thibodeau did split a sack as well. But this team has the same issues they've had. I think Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are probably at their wits' end with the chances of staying in New York. So I expect them to probably get desperate at some point and put Jackson Dart in just to see if he can kickstart the offense and maybe, keep the Giants afloat offensively. I do think, though, they're going to wait till Andrew Thomas is back before doing that, though. This was definitely a winnable game for the Giants, though, against Washington. Washington is a beatable team. I know they were in the playoffs last year and had a good record, and they're still a good team right now. But the Giants only scoring 6 points is disappointing. This was a winnable game. As I've noted, I think Washington takes a slight step back this year, even if they still are a playoff team. I don't expect them to have as high of a ceiling as most people expect. I know they did lose last night to Green Bay. As I noted, I think Green Bay wins the Super Bowl this year, and that was even before they got Micah Parsons. I thought they would win the Super Bowl. Now moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers at the New York Jets, and Aaron Rodgers' return to MetLife Stadium. Pittsburgh won that game 34-32. Rodgers turned back time and delivered a vintage Aaron Rodgers performance, 22 of 30 passing, 244 passing yards and 4 touchdowns. He was 6 of 8 passing on play action attempts in this game, 75 yards and 3 touchdowns on play action, and that's per Next Gen Stats. So obviously Rodgers in his prime was really, really good, out of play action, getting teams to bite on the play action and then basically just airing it out downfield. And in that game, he showed that he really hasn't wavered with his arm talent. He's still one of the top arms in the game, and that's why I had him in my top 10 in my predictions for quarterback predictions before the season began in my episode with the sports guru Mike Hurley, because I still have faith in Aaron Rodgers' talent. I didn't really think the Jets and their record was his fault. He played well last year and obviously showed that he still has some left in the tank. He obviously made some remarks about the New York Jets and how he was happy beating them and anyone associated with the Jets after winning that game on Sunday as a member of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Still the same Aaron Rodgers he always was. He's not afraid to say whatever he feels like to the media, even if it's taking a slight dig at the New York Jets, his former team. He's fine doing that. Did play very well in that game, though. Showed that he still has some left in the tank. Justin Fields put up some impressive numbers for the Jets in that game. 218 passing yards and a passing touchdown with 12 carries for 48 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. The Jets outgained Pittsburgh in that game, 394-271. The Steelers somehow found a way to come back down 9 in the second half, taking the lead early in the fourth quarter and then securing the W with a 60-yard field goal from Chris Boswell. Minnesota against Chicago on Monday night was a good game. Minnesota ended up winning that one 27-24. What a fourth quarter performance by J.J. McCarthy and the Vikings, scoring 3 touchdowns in 10 minutes in the fourth quarter, 2 passing touchdowns from J.J. and a rushing touchdown as well in that 3-touchdown stretch there. He showed a lot of poise in the second half. After a tough first half, he struggled, but he looked really good in the second half. He's in a good position to succeed with Kevin O'Connell being his play caller and running the offense, Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, TJ Hawkinson, and then at some point Jordan Addison joining that offense. He has a lot of talent around him to succeed. Caleb Williams showed some flashes of his potential in that game on Monday night. However, the offensive line was still an issue. Caleb was pressured on 45.5% of the time, the second highest in week 1 per Pro Football Focus. Caleb looked awesome on the first drive of the game, even showcased his ceiling with a strong arm, good mobility, and he evaded the pass rush very well, it seemed like all game. Got out of a lot of would-be sacks and found a way to make plays and gain at least a few yards on the ground. He was off target on a few throws that he really needed to complete, but I think that's going to come as the season goes along. He's going to find a way to build more chemistry with his receivers. He was 21 of 35 passing, 210 passing yards, a passing touchdown, with 6 carries of 58 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown. I still think the Bears will figure things out. I have faith in Caleb Williams to be a top 10 quarterback in the NFL this season. The raw talent's there, and obviously there were some throws he needed to make that he didn't make. But I think over the course of the season, he's going to make some of those throws. I expect this Bears team to be a playoff team this season. And then the last game I'm going to talk about, which I probably should talk about, that game between the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens. That was an awesome Sunday night football game, and I feel like when Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen play each other, when you have 2 top quarterbacks play each other, there were obviously high expectations for that game to be a fun game to watch and something that's going to be right down to the wire. But that game exceeded even those expectations. They were better than you could even expect with that game. It was an awesome one to watch. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen. It was a great battle. Allen ended up winning that game. It was a heroic one for the Buffalo Bills. They came back in the fourth quarter. Baltimore fumbled with Derrick Henry fumbling late in the fourth quarter, which never really happens. You never really can expect Derrick Henry to fumble, especially in a late game situation like that. But somehow Buffalo found a way to recover it and then set themselves up to win the game with a game-winning field goal. And that was a great story as well. They had a game-winning field goal in that game by Matt Prater, the kicker that they picked up a few days before that, with their real kicker, Tyler Bass, their starting kicker, going out with an injury and being out 4 games. They ended up signing Prater to a deal a couple days before the game, and he ends up kicking the game-winning field goal, which is a great story. Josh Allen was awesome in that game. And I know I've been critical of Josh Allen in the past for his turnovers, but he's found a way to really slim those down over the last couple seasons and is still putting up big-time numbers, even though he didn't have as many passing touchdowns last year as some of the other quarterbacks that I'd ranked above him. If you look at total touchdowns, he was one of the top in the league last year when you consider the rushing touchdowns. And then you look at the beginning of this season in week 1, he played well, and so did Lamar in that game. Allen finished with 394 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, also with 30 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, so 4 total touchdowns on the day there for him. And then Lamar Jackson was 14 of 19 passing, 209 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Adden also was very good on the ground as well, 6 carries for 70 yards and a touchdown. Showcased his ability to obviously be a dual threat quarterback as he does on a weekly basis. And the same thing with Josh Allen. You would just wish those two quarterbacks would play each other every single week, considering every game goes right down to the wire and you're watching two of the top talents in the NFL go at it. So that was a thrilling game, and hopefully, you see those two teams play each other in the playoffs, since it would be nothing short of a thriller until the end, and that would be a game everybody would be waiting for. And the last game I'll mention is the Indianapolis Colts, who demolished the Miami Dolphins in Week 1, 33-8. Daniel Jones played very well in this game for the Colts. He became one of 5 players with 250-plus passing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns in a season opener, joining John Elway, Troy Aikman, Otto Graham, and Jim McMahon. That's obviously 3 Hall of Fame talents right there that put up those same numbers in a season opener, and Daniel Jones is now the 5th quarterback to ever do so. He also became the first quarterback since 2019, and he did this as a member of the New York Giants. He became the first quarterback to record 2 rushing touchdowns, 1+ passing touchdowns, and 0 interceptions in his first start with the new team. And he did that as a rookie against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 2019 as a member of the New York Giants. That's per a stat from Ari Myrov on Twitter. The Colts scored on all 7 of their offensive possessions in that game, becoming the first team since at least 1978 to score on every single offensive possession of a game. And that means there were no turnovers on downs, no turnovers, no missed field goals, no punts, no end of halves. Every single possession that they had, they ended up scoring on, whether it was a touchdown or a field goal, which is very impressive. And that's a stat per the NFL that the Colts became the first team since at least 1978 to score on all of their offensive possessions. I know a lot of people point out the Buffalo Bills in their playoff game against the Patriots a few years ago, where they scored on 7 out of 7 offensive possessions, but they actually did have a possession where they nailed the ball at the end of that game, so that technically counts as an offensive possession. So the Colts actually ended up becoming, as I said, the first team to ever do so. Daniel Jones was awesome in this game, and I couldn't be more happy to see him have success. He was great in this one, 22 of 29 passing for 272 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown with 7 carries for 26 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Miami's defense and their team overall looked like they really are going to struggle this year. It didn't seem like they were playing with any heart or any effort in this game. And as I mentioned in my predictions, Mike McDaniel could be the first head coach fired, because it seems like this team just quit on him and they weren't giving it their all, which is tough to say, obviously, considering it's only week 1, so every team is still alive and, no one's clinched the playoffs just yet. But it seems like this team just was not playing with any energy. And it's obviously concerning that they already had a team meeting after week 1 of the season. I understand doing team meetings after a bad stretch of, let's say, 4 or 5 games. But if you're doing a team meeting after week 1, that is concerning, considering that means that some players on the team probably are expecting or thought some of the players around them, were quitting and weren't really giving it their all. And Mike McDaniel, I do think he's a good head coach, but with Miami struggling like this, if this were to continue all year, I would not be surprised to see Miami move on from him. I think Miami is a team that had their chance the last couple of years to really figure things out, and they really struggled when they had their opportunities in the playoffs, which is disappointing. And even if this team's going to struggle this year and this defense won't be good, they'll be probably an average defense at best, it's still impressive that Daniel Jones was able to put up the numbers that he did. He looked excellent in this game. It definitely deserves the praise after all the backlash he got over the last few years as a member of the New York Giants. As a Tua Tagovailoa, he did struggle in this game. 14 of 23 passing, 114 passing yards, with a passing touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a fumble lost. Like I mentioned in my predictions, it won't be long until Tyreek Hill requests a trade from this team, considering how much they're struggling on offense and the fact that this team is probably going to be getting a top pick overall in the draft. I would expect Tyreek Hill to request a trade at some point in the near future. And while I was recording this episode outside, I met a nice guy named Eric outside at BC while I was recording this. So shout out, Eric. I appreciate you giving the podcast a follow. Anyways, that'll wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen to this. As always, I appreciate it. I hope you guys are good on. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you.